Been great Bodhisattva warriors. We've been at it since 9:30 this morning. These guys are great. Haven't skipped any sessions. They even asked for meditation. So welcome to Julianne's yoga group. Nice to have you with us. As you may have heard, Julianne and I conspired to do a session with all of us together. So I'm really glad to have you here. And I'll just review just a little bit of what we've been doing. We've been doing a text on what's called in the Tibetan tradition thought transformation, which is these radical techniques for completely switching around our habit of looking out for number one first and forgetting about other people. Okay, it's this sort of innate habit that we have that according to Buddhism is just, the cause of us not being Buddhas today. The reason we're not enlightened yet is because that we have this terrible habit, and so we need strong measures to reverse this tendency. So the text that we've been working with all weekend is about these strong, radical measures to turn this around. And so what we're going to be talking about tonight, we're skipping ahead a little bit in the text to these commitments and precepts of thought transformation practice, okay? And so these are these little sort of reminders and tricks of the trade that I've been talking about. And this is a way to practice in your daily life, just ways to remind yourself on a daily basis how to reverse this tendency. We taught a meditation technique called Tonglen, giving and taking, which is the practice for the meditation cushion, and this is sort of practice for daily life time, okay, using these precepts and commitments. Okay, so what I've done is passed out this little handout called Appendix 1, Commitments and Precepts of Thought Transformation Practice. And you also have in the back of your book, in the text now, you all don't have this book, The Kindness of Others, but I'll be reading out, I think, do we have any copies? We just have a 4 copies. But we'll mostly be working, this is something that you can take home and work with. So I'll be reading the way it's translated in this text and also referring to your handout. So the reason I gave out this handout is because it's a bit easier to understand. So if you've got that, you'll be all set. You'll be able to practice. Now, which part? Yeah. So the commitment, what I've handed out isn't in your book. This is a separate translation. Did you get one? Did you get one of these? Okay. Maybe if the people who are going to be here tomorrow, if you can share, and then how many people didn't get one? How many more copies do I need to make? Okay. There's some extras over there? Okay, great. Then we may have enough. Okay. Okay, and then in the text, the translation starts at the bottom of page 99, for those of you that have this Kindness of Others text. And let me explain why I've given out another translation. Now, this text was written, as I mentioned the story yesterday, of Geshe Chekwa, who came from the far eastern part of Tibet. Now, Tibet's kind of famous for having lots and lots of regional dialects, like most countries that have very high mountains with valleys in between, So they developed these regional dialects that are quite distinct and, in fact, at times completely incomprehensible to people who aren't from that specific little valley. In fact, even just last month, we had the abbot of Sarajay Monastery here to visit. He was in California, so he came for a day to visit. And he is a nomad from the same district of Kham in East Tibet. And our own resident translator, Venerable Steve, said afterwards, I could barely understand a word he said, So even in these days, even that they're all together in the monastery, and you hear this from people in the monasteries, they're like, these young boys show up and they're from some outlying area, and it's like, yeah, they're speaking Greek, you don't understand at all. So this text, especially this part, the commitments and precepts of mind training, these little one-line aphorisms, are written in this colloquial dialect, like totally full of idioms, and according to most Western translators, they're really hard to even translate or understand. They don't have a clue what they're talking about. It's like, have you ever read like books that have dialogue and these really intense, like a southern accent written in phonetics, and you're kind of like, This is like this with lots of idioms in there too. And this one friend of mine who's a translator, this Canadian nun, was working on a translation of this text. She spoke fluent Tibetan according to this, Central Lhasa dialect. So she had to go with her Lama, and then they found another Lama who's from this area of Kham where they spoke this dialect. And so all three of them had to work together to work out this text. And so even now, even though it's been translated into English, there are a lot of sort of idioms and colloquialisms and things that we'll see. And so that's why I handed out this other translation. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama's main translator, Thupten Jinpa, out of the kindness of his heart, basically translated the meaning rather than the words. Okay? So this one that I handed out is basically the meaning of all these aphorisms. So we'll go over the meaning tonight, but basically when you take this home and in about a week, if you haven't taken good notes and you don't know what it means to load the load of a zoe on an ox and you're completely baffled, this paper will tell you. Okay. Just a little background to why you have two papers. So like I said, these are just reminders and more details about how to practice this thought transformation. We'll just go through them one by one, and I'll explain the meaning, and then we'll have some time for questions. Okay. So the first one, according to the text in the book, says, pretty obvious, don't go against the mind training you promised to observe. Okay? What this means is, like I said, these are really radical measures of thought transformation practice. Don't use the excuse of practicing these things to disrespect your other vows and disrespect your other commitments of mind training. Don't get so excited about these great practices that you disregard all of your other training, all of your other vows. Okay? They don't make your other vows irrelevant. So don't contradict the other things that you've been committed to do. Don't think you're just, a crazy yogi and you can do whatever you want and break all of your other vows. Okay? Be crazy about taking care of others. Be completely nuts about serving other beings, but don't be crazy about the rest of your behavior, and don't disrespect, your other morality and the other vows that you've taken. Okay, so that's what this first one means. Don't be reckless in your practice. That's related. Don't think that you're this great thought transformation practitioner and think, oh, you're protected by your, awakening bodhicitta, and you can be in all of these dangerous situations and you'll be somehow safe. You have this precious opportunity in this human life to practice. Protect yourself. Don't be reckless. Don't put yourself in dangerous situations. Just because you've taken these, practices on, don't be reckless. Don't act reckless. Okay, does this mean sometimes to benefit other beings, you might have to do one of these brave activities like, jump into the rushing river to try and save someone? Yeah, of course, like at certain times, in order to really benefit someone, you will have to put yourself in a dangerous situation, but just don't be reckless about it. Don't be foolhardy. Don't just kind of, be out there on the street doing all of these wild, crazy things just because you're practicing these techniques of thought transformation. Okay? Don't be partial. Always train in the three general points. So this means don't make your thought transformation practice selective. Don't discriminate between people. Practice equally with everyone. Don't practice these techniques only with your Dharma friends at Land of Medicine Buddha and then be a jerk at work. Like, don't only practice in certain situations. Don't only practice with people that you like and not with people that you don't like, or people that have some kind of power over you, like people who are your superiors, and then you diss your inferiors. All of these examples. Practice impartially with everyone. Don't be partial, and don't let it depend on what kind of situation you're in. Okay? So practice with impartiality towards all. The fourth one, transform your attitude but maintain your natural behavior. Okay? Don't make a big deal out of these practices. Okay? Like I said, get crazy about helping other beings and developing this attitude, of wanting to benefit others, but don't get pretentious about it. Don't make a big deal out of it. Don't look different, don't act different. Don't act, like you're holier than everyone else and like you're a big deal. Just be humble. Just be natural. And I think my big hero, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, is a great example of this. He says, hey, I'm just I'm a simple monk, and I'm just trying. I really admire this idea of wanting to benefit others. I don't know. It sounds like a really good idea to me. Trying to put it into practice. He never toots his own horn, says that he's a big deal at all, And it's just obvious from his behavior. So let your behavior speak for itself. Just don't make a big deal out of your practice. Nobody should know that you're trying to do this crazy save the world behavior, Keep humble about it and just keep it to yourself. Don't make a big deal out of it. Okay, so transform your attitude, but maintain your natural behavior. Don't speak of others' incomplete qualities. Just don't talk about other people's faults. The original text says, don't speak of others' withered limbs. This is one of these idioms from this, don't speak of others' withered limbs. So you will see faults in others. Believe me, they'll see faults in you. Just don't talk about it. Just don't worry about it. Don't talk about other people's faults. Don't talk behind their back. Don't point them out. We all have faults. Let's just try and be a little patient and forgiving of each other. Okay? So don't speak of others' withered limbs, incomplete qualities. Okay? Don't concern yourself with others' business. This is really, really similar to that, okay? You see other people making mistakes, just don't worry about it. Worry about your own spiritual practice. So many people were always looking at everyone else and judging them and criticizing them, and if only we spent, one fraction of that energy on our own, faults and spiritual practice and really try to turn inwards like that. Now, does this mean if you see somebody close to you doing something that seems like a mistake, you don't point it out? No, of course. If you see someone close to you that seems like they're breaking their vows or doing something that seems really unskillful, yes, of course, you have an obligation to talk to them. But it's your attitude that has to be really, out of love and compassion to them and a wish to help them. And that's really different from just this fault-finding mind, I've fought this so much. I was sort of raised with this sort of critical, judgmental, fault-finding mind. And I was always, whatever anybody did, it's like the glass was never half full. It was always half empty, and it was kind of funky anyway. And all I did was just see the faults in everyone. It's been a really long, hard uphill struggle that is not quite won yet, to overcome this. But these teachings say just forget about it. And besides which, you don't know. You don't know what they're doing. Unless you're clairvoyant, you have no idea what they're doing, why they're doing what they're doing. Okay? Bodhisattvas sometimes emanate and act in really unusual ways, and you have no idea what the ultimate benefit may be of what they're doing. Using the wisdom that you have now, if you feel like they're really making a mistake, yes, very, very kindly and skillfully talk to them about it. But just don't get so involved with other people's business and point out other people's faults. Okay? So the next one, train to counter whichever disturbing emotion is greatest. Okay? This is all about identifying your worst mental affliction, afflictive emotion, and then training to counteract it. We are so good at pointing out number 3, Number 1 and number 2 are really hard for us to see. All our best friends see it. We don't see it at all. I remember I used to go on and on about all my desire, what a problem I had with desire. And my friends were like, what about the pride and the criticism and judgment? You're not talking about that at all, right? Like, we're so good at seeing number 3, and it's really hard for us to see number one. So this is saying, get over your denial, really look at your mind. You know, this is one of these things, I came out of this very long meditation retreat, and I've said a couple of stories this weekend about, you know, how incredibly painful it is to just be looking at your mind starkly 24 hours a day with no distraction. I mean, it ain't pretty. Being in solitary confinement with my mind, it was no picnic. I got news for you. But I really saw, you know, I couldn't be in denial about number one and number two anymore. You know, so that kind of mindfulness, people have been talking about how it's so frustrating because all of a sudden you're, you know, when you turn that level of awareness and mindfulness onto your mind, you do see all these things, and all you're seeing is your mistakes, and all you're seeing is your own faults, and it becomes kind of overwhelming and frustrating. But it's such a necessary first step to be able to practice. Like, you really get over your denial, you know, and for that you just need to turn the focus of mindfulness and awareness onto your mind and just see what's going on. Okay? So this one says, counter whichever disturbing emotion is greatest. Okay? And sometimes I think this is a key too about how not to get overwhelmed. Work on one at a time. You know, you might see all these faults when you really start practicing and really start, you know, being mindful about what's going on with you. But pick one at a time and really work on it until you see the results, and then switch to another one. You know, and this is a way to skillfully practice. Don't just think, oh my God, I've got like 10 major things that happen all the time. Just, you know, just weed it down and pick out one and really work, you know, focus your mindfulness on that one quality until you feel like it starts to subdue, and then pick another one, you know, so as not to be overwhelmed. Okay? Give up every hope of reward. Don't expect praise. Don't expect rewards. Remember, you're being humble about this. Nobody even knows what you're trying to do. So don't expect people to pat you on the back, okay? You know, things will get better for you, I guarantee it, because what? You're planting the karmic seeds for things to change. But just don't expect rewards. Don't expect immediate results from your practice. You know, since beginningless time, we've been in this mind state of self-cherishing and self-grasping, you know, looking out for number one. It's not going to change overnight, so don't expect instant results, and don't expect anybody to thank you. Don't expect somebody to come clap you on the back and go, you know, I've really been noticing lately that you've been cherishing others and really working at that number one affliction, and I just want to tell you, good job, well done. You know? It's not going to happen. You're going to be the only one who probably knows, you know, and that should be good enough. Okay, that should be good enough. And also in terms of Buddhism, we're practicing to attain states of realization not for our own sake, but for the benefit of all other sentient beings, right? Like, the only reason to become a Buddha is that you develop all of these incredible qualities that you'll be able to benefit sentient beings. So this is also saying, don't even expect the reward of liberation from cyclic existence. You know, don't even practice for the reward of the elimination of all of your suffering. Only practice for this goal and this wish to be able to develop the qualities to benefit all other sentient beings. And we were talking a little bit earlier this afternoon about this thing of like, aren't you sort of using as other people when you practice? You know, you have to practice in relationship with people. Aren't you sort of using them even in your visualization? You're visualizing yourself generating compassion for them. But the ultimate motivation, the only reason you're doing it in the first place, is to get to this state where you're really able to benefit other sentient beings, you know. So in the short term, you may have to do these things that involve spending a lot of time on your meditation cushion and all your friends feel ignored, but the only reason that you're doing it is because you want to be able to really benefit them in a way that counts, not just by hanging out with them and watching Netflix. My pet peeve of the weekend, sorry. That was for Michelle. She made a confession earlier today. Okay, so basically, you know, don't expect any kind of short-term reward. Your reward will be when you become a bodhisattva and are able to send out countless emanation bodies to give every sentient being what they want. Who wants more of a reward than that? Like, forget about the short-term pats on the back, okay? Avoid poisonous food. What the heck does this mean? Probably some like weird colloquialism. Okay. When you do a good deed, don't poison it with self-cherishing and self-grasping, okay? Don't poison it with these mind states that you're trying to overcome. You know, for once since beginningless time, you did something good. You know, great, finally, like it's about time. You know, don't poison it with this thought of like inherently existent, with pride about it, with any kind of self-cherishing about it. Ooh, now I'm a great bodhisattva, like I finally did one good thing, you know, that was against self-cherishing. So just don't poison it. It's about time. It's about time we woke up, you know, so let's just keep going. This is just the beginning, okay? So when you do something for others, when you overcome this self-cherishing, you know, just don't mix it up with more self-cherishing and more self-grasping. And then it just creates this endless cycle, okay? One of the translations in this book says, don't maintain misplaced loyalty. But the other translations say, don't hold a grudge. Don't hold a grudge, you know? If somebody's harmed you, just let go of any kind of resentment. And we were talking a little bit earlier today about this thing that when you're really practicing Buddhism, you really can't complain about anything because whatever happens to you is just a result of your karma, you know, just a result of some cause. So we said if you have this repeating pattern in your life, you can't even fetch about it to your friends because it's like holding up a sign to saying like, I did this countless times to other sentient beings. Look at me. I'm suffering like this now, you know? So how can you hold a grudge? Anything that you experience is a result of something that you've done in the past. Like forget about it. It's too embarrassing. Like how can you hold a grudge? You know, it's totally embarrassing. Like you can't even complain anymore. It's such a drag. You can't even... You know, you can't get away with anything. Like karma doesn't take holidays, you know? So don't hold a grudge. The next one, don't make sarcastic remarks. And then the other translation that I like a little bit better for this one says, don't respond to malicious talk. Okay? If other people say terrible things about you behind your back, just don't say anything in response. Yeah? Don't lie in ambush. When someone's hurt you or done something to harm you, just don't make any plans to retaliate, okay? And all of these last three really relate just in general to just not retaliating when somebody does anything to hurt you, whether it's verbal, you know, whether it's physical, holding a grudge against people that hurt you. This is just saying, forget about retaliation. Forget about it. Just don't go there, you know? Don't respond. And this relates, if any of you have taken bodhisattva vows, there's a bodhisattva vow that says don't return anger with anger, don't return scolding with scolding, you know, don't return beating with beating, don't even return like killing with killing, like whatever anybody does to you, just, Jesus said it really well, turn the other cheek, you know? Just don't retaliate at all. It's total un-bodhisattva activity to retaliate in any way when you've been harmed. Okay? So all of these last three relate to that. Number 13, don't strike at the vital point. What does that mean? Okay? When you have a chance to criticize or embarrass somebody who's hurt you in front of other people, right? You have a chance to somehow harm them by saying something that they've done, you know, in front of their boss, going behind their back, criticizing them, or even in front of them, even just embarrassing somebody publicly, right? And this relates to holding a grudge. Like somebody has hurt you, somebody you feel has wronged you, and so you take the opportunity to embarrass them publicly or say something behind their back that's going to get them in trouble or hurt them. We had a word for this in elementary school. It was called being a tattletale. Remember being a tattletale? This is like, don't be a tattletale. You know, don't take the opportunity to hurt someone somehow just because they've hurt you in the past. Okay. Now, number 14, don't burden an ox with the load of a zoe. Now, this is the one that you need the other translation for, okay? A zo is this animal that's found in the Himalayan regions as a beast of burden, and it's a cross between a yak and a cow. Okay? Yaks can't go below a certain altitude. Cows can't go above a certain altitude. These animals can go both places. So they can go up and down the Himalayas. They're a lot stronger than cows, and they're not as temperamental as yaks. Yaks are kind of like camels. They're really bad-tempered, and they charge you as soon as they look at you. So these are these kind of mild-mannered, huge, stupid, dumb animals that take heavy loads up and down the Himalayas, okay? They're really pretty, actually. I shouldn't call them stupid. They're really nice. So that's what these zoos are. I took lots of photographs of them. I was so excited when I went trekking in the Himalayas. Like, zoos were the first kind of different animal that I saw. And I took all these pictures, and all the Tibetans are like, what are you doing? You know, sort of like you're in Mexico taking pictures of donkeys. They're like, what are you doing? Why? So what does this mean? Okay. This means we've got a wonderful idiom for this in English. Don't pass the buck. This is what this means. Don't pass the buck. If you've done something wrong, don't blame it on anybody else. Just admit it. Just take responsibility. Okay? So don't pass the buck. Now, it's very interesting. Even if you feel like something wasn't your fault, you know, even if you feel like somebody else was to blame, still go ahead and take the responsibility anyway. This is amazing. This is a great way to deal with conflict. You know, there's all these workshops about conflict resolution. Forget it. This is the easiest way. You know, somebody's mad at you because they think that you did something or said something to them, and you feel like you didn't do or say whatever they said you said, and you go through this whole trip and you try and explain and no, it was really like this and these were the circumstances. Forget about it. Just go to them and say, I'm so sorry if I did anything to hurt you. Please forgive me. And it's so hard if you feel like it wasn't your fault. This is really, really hard. But let me tell you something. It works like a charm. It changes the energy instantly. You just go to the person, you go, you know, I know there's this big misunderstanding, and I know you feel so hurt by what I did. Will you please forgive me? You know, and you just take responsibility for it. And it's like magic. Don't go through this thing, oh, well, Tuesday afternoon at 3:30, I thought that you were going to do this, and so I did this because I thought that that was going to happen, and so I did that. And, you know, and you make up this whole story, and you justify, and it just complicates everything. So this is saying, just take responsibility. Whether you did it and you feel like it was your fault, you know, don't blame others. And even if you didn't feel like it was your fault, just go ahead and take the responsibility. You know, it just completely cuts through that whole story and changes the dynamic. Okay? Okay, don't abuse the practice. Okay. And this is something that sort of relates to one of the ones before. These thought transformation practices are supposed to just starve your tendency to take care of yourself first. If you use it to feed your pride, to look good, to feed your mental afflictions, you're taking something really pure and contaminating it, okay? So just don't do it. Just don't abuse this beautiful practice by using it, twisting it around to just make you look good. Okay? Don't sprint to win the race. Okay? If you're in a group and there's some profit to be made, or there's something that you're all sharing together, don't try and get the best for yourself. Okay? Don't try and redirect things so that you get the best before anybody else can get it. Don't get in the front of the line, you know. Don't try and get the benefit from any of these situations. Okay, this also includes if you've been involved in some project with a whole group of people. Let's say you're at work and 3 of you have been working on a project, and in the staff meeting, the boss turns to you and says, it was so great what you did, that work you did on your project. Don't take all the credit. You know, say, oh, Joe and Mary worked with me too, you know. So don't take all the credit for something that you did collectively with other people, and also don't take the best for yourself in anything that you're sharing with other people. I had an incident of this just the other day in the kitchen of Land of Medicine Buddha, and I will make a confession. So it was about 6:15, and we'd had this delicious apple crisp for lunch, and I'm sitting in my room preparing for this class, reading my books, and I get a Jones for the apple crisp, and I know that there's a whole pan left over, so I go up to the kitchen, open up the fridge. There's a huge pan with sort of one serving left in the corner of it. So I pull it out, and I'm thinking, oh my God, okay, it's 6:15. I know that most people don't eat until about 7. But there's only one serving, and then I think, oh, I'll take half of it. But then it's really annoying to me when people just leave like 3 tablespoonfuls in this like huge pan. And I just couldn't be bothered getting a small bowl and transferring and doing this whole number and this, plastic wrap and all this stuff. So I'm like, forget about it, So I serve myself all the rest of the apple crisp and wash the pan and put it away, right? So I'm heading down the stairs, and I'm feeling a little, I'm feeling like, oh, this isn't right, but I can't be bothered doing all this. I'm in a hurry, and I'm preparing for this class, by the way. I'm doing wonderful work for sentient beings. So I head down, and another staff member is walking up the stairs with an empty bowl and a spoon in her hand, and she sees me, and she says, "Oh, apple crisp time." And I was like, oh my God. And luckily, fortunately, she allowed me to give her half, because there I was, all the rest of the apple crisp, I was like so busted, and I knew it. I just knew it was going to be like that. Like I had trepid, I knew I should have just taken a small bowl and served myself. So it worked out, and we both learned something. And she's like, oh my God, I really learned something from this. I'm not quite sure what it is, but I think I really learned something. She's like, I learned to, look before I talk. And I go, well, I learned not to be such a pig, and not to take the last, serving of the apple crisp. Like, boy, when I see one serving left, I'm not going anywhere near it again. And this is what this is talking about. Like, don't sprint to win the race. Don't, try and get the best thing for yourself. Don't try and get the first best helping, and don't take the last piece too if you know that other people will get deprived, okay? So don't sprint to win the race. My confession for the evening, okay? Wasn't that bad. It was just apple crisp after all, right? But the principle. Yeah. Don't turn the gods into devils, okay? And again, this is talking about tainting your thought transformation practice with other motivations. Don't take this pure thing and just use it as some kind of an excuse to act out on all of your mental afflictions, your afflictive emotions. Your afflictions should decrease as a result of this practice and not increase. Okay, so that's what this one is talking about. And then the last of the group of 18, don't seek others' misery as a means to happiness. Okay? So don't use finding out negative things about other people to make yourself happy. Justify your opinions, prove that you're right. Any of these things that we do all the time. Find out about other people's mistakes and you're like, I told you so, I knew that. Just don't. Other people's mistakes, other people's failings, just don't use them to make yourself happy. Don't get off on the misfortune that happens to other people. We had a conversation about this the other night at the Four Noble Truths class at Loudon Nelson Center. And we're talking about one of the 10 non-virtues is maliciousness, okay? And it includes this idea of ill will, plotting someone ill. But most of us don't do that on a daily basis. But we do have a tendency to sort of get off on gossip, especially sort of negative gossip. And I said in that class that, the National Enquirer sales are dependent on this factor, this thing of we get a little thrill hearing about, what's her name, Angelina Jolie, and what's her name fighting over Brad Pitt, and, we want to hear what happens next, and oh, maybe there's a cat fight, and like whatever like that. So that's what this is talking about, and it's just this tendency that we have to just sort of get off a little bit on others' misfortune. And someone in that, actually 2 people in that class, said that there's a German word for exactly this, Schadenfreude. Yeah? Schadenfreude. Everybody knows this, but I just learned this Wednesday night. That's great. So it's a really specific word that refers to this little thrill that we get, from other people's misfortune. Believe me, if you're trying to be a bodhisattva, you're trying to get enlightened for the sake of all sentient beings and wish them every happiness in the entire universe, why are you going to get off on this mere misfortune? It's so un-bodhisattva. Like, this is just totally contrary to the whole spirit of being a bodhisattva. Okay, so that's what this one is talking about. Just don't use other people's misfortune to think you're going to get some benefit from it at all. Even if it's just some little temporary pleasure. Okay, so this is the first group of 18.6 of the thought transformation practices. So are there questions about these ones? Anything, comments? Any questions? Yeah.
What's your response to somebody's always talking about the ill will and misfortune of others to you? And you weren't trying to reflect on it yourself, how would you respond?
Can you give an example?
Well, if somebody's always coming to you telling you, guess what, that this person's failing and struggling and gossiping to you, and you're inclined to practice not engaging in that activity, what would an appropriate response be?
Yeah, well, the question was, what happens if someone's always coming to you, kind of wanting to revel in other people's misfortune with you, right? Like they're coming, oh, guess what? I think one of the ways is just to pretend that you don't get it at all, that they're happy about it, and go, oh, that's terrible. What a shame. React really compassionately, like be stupid. Just don't even get it. Don't even check into what their intention is. Like when they come and report something terrible and they want you to sort of rub your hands together and think how great it is too, go, oh, poor thing, is there anything we can do for them? Is there anything we can do to help them? And that'll pull the rug right out from under them. And I've done this with people when I was really trying to work on my critical, judgmental mind. I did this. And I had this friend, and she and I used to diss people, like together, all the time. And then I was really trying to work on it and not do this anymore. So she'd come up to me and she'd complain about somebody. She'd find fault with someone. And I would say, like I remember one time, we're at the airport and somebody had messed up her airline reservation. So she came up to complain about him and go, oh, I can't believe it. He did this thing again and he's so unreliable. And I just said, I get along with him so well and I've really been enjoying him lately. Like I just acted like she'd said something really nice about this person. She looked at me. She was so bewildered, but it totally cut the energy. I had to appear completely schizophrenic in the moment, but it really worked to just cut the energy, and completely pull out the rug from under that. So I think that's what you do. And it's going to seem really weird, but it's such a shock to the other person that it does the trick a lot more effectively than if you sit down and you go, you know what, honey, the 18 points of the Lojong of Geshe Chekoa says we shouldn't really do this. That's not going to work. Just counter with the right thing. Hold the line and counter by doing the right thing in that situation. I think that's more effective just due to mere shock value than almost anything. Yeah? Yeah.
Well, that sounds good, but when it's your job to sort of listen to these people's, because there's certain, people coming who do a lot of that. So much of it.
Yeah.
It's getting to the point where when they come over, I know where around.
Right.
I run away because it just becomes, okay, and I sort of, because I really don't want to hear that anymore.
Yeah.
And it's just, particularly, just trying to not enforce that myself and not really trying to encourage it, but, if I push back, I just don't want to ruffle a already confused person who go, oh.
And I think just sort of not entering in, I can think a lot of times of workplaces, because a lot of people have a really hard time. The question was about, sort of what do you do if this is just sort of the dynamic of some situation, how do you skillfully sort of not engage without ruffling people's feathers? And a lot of people, especially when they're first getting into Buddhist practice, say, oh, it's so hard in my workplace because every lunch break, everybody sits around like dissing everyone. what do I do? You know, that's just kind of like what's happening. Everybody just sits around talking behind other people's backs. And generally, just being quiet, just sitting there quietly and not really entering in, not feeding it, trying to change the subject in a really skillful way. You know, usually they're so unconscious about it, but I think for sure, you know, you're not, you know, you don't sort of come up like, you know, holding your copy of 7-Point Lojong and tell them how wrong they are, but just skillfully kind of trying to steer the conversation away from that, or just sitting quietly, and at a certain point, you know, you get up and go about your business and leave and just not entering in. And sometimes that gives the message in a really subtle way, you know, that you just aren't interested in that kind of talk. Because usually people, they just do it out of bad habits, and they sort of know that it's not so cool either, you know, so if you just kind of signal by your non-engagement that you're not really into, you know, dealing with that, I think that can be really effective too, you know. But yeah, you don't preach at people at work. Just forget it. You know, it's not going to work. Do it in a more subtle way. Yeah. You're going to go to hell for saying that, you know. Don't try doing that. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Comments? Yeah, Julia.
Maybe you shared about this a little bit before we got here, but I was just, I love the way sometimes you say sometimes people may think Buddhism is a little like black belt codependency.
Oh, yeah, we've been talking about that a lot, you know, and that's one of the things that comes up with this teaching about, you know, overcoming your self-cherishing and thinking of other people first, you know, and not doing all of the selfish acts. And a lot of times people say, wait a minute, I take care of other people all the time. In fact, I don't have any space for myself at all because I'm so busy taking care of other people. And in order for these teachings to really make sense, you sort of have to have quite a lot of understanding about how the Buddhist worldview works, especially in terms of how we create our reality by our minds, you know, by our karma kind of interrelating with dependent origination, and things aren't solidly sort of coming at us. So I think a lot of times when people have that caretaking and enabling kind of tendency, they're really thinking that they're sort of worthless unless they take care of other people. So instead of coming from this sort of bodhisattva attitude of like, you know, I'm going to help other beings because it's sort of, you know, it's my destiny to become a fully enlightened being in order to help all other beings. A lot of times that enabling, you know, caretaking, codependent behavior comes out of this really solid feeling of low self-esteem, and unless you're taking care of other people all the time, you're sort of a total waste of oxygen, you know. So it's kind of coming out of a completely different view. And also, as we talked about this a little bit this afternoon, this behavior doesn't involve being a doormat and letting people walk all over you and giving them whatever they want, even if it's not skillful. Like being a bodhisattva sometimes involves being wrathful, being harsh, straightening people up, you know, in kind of a fierce way, like what they call with teenagers tough love, you know. So it's not about being a doormat, you know. Benefiting other beings often involves being quite unpopular and having to say things to them that they'd really rather not hear, just to straighten them up. Okay, so there are a lot of differences, and I think sometimes, you know, you hear these teachings and it goes so against the grain of how you've been trained to think your whole life that you have this reaction of like, oh no, you know, I don't want to be a doormat, I'm already doing so much for other beings. And it's not like that at all, you know, it's not like that at all. But it's about overcoming, you know, so much of the time we have this really solid sense of self that we just try and reinforce all the time. You know, we try and reinforce it constantly. One of my favorite quotes from Chogkyi Trungpa Rinpoche, he was giving a lecture on the nature of reality, on this view of emptiness. And one of the students said, why is it so hard for us to see the nature of reality the way that it is? And he says, because your ego wants an umbilical cord through which it can feed all the time. Whoa, you know, that's intense. And that's what we do even with our codependent behavior. It just feeds our ego. right? It feeds our ego. You know, we have a place in life as long as we're taking care of everyone else and mostly not even letting them take care of ourselves. So it all just feeds this false view of self that we have, and that's really, really different. And what we say in Buddhism is you need method and wisdom at the same time. You know, and the method side is developing the compassion and the bodhicitta, and then the wisdom side is developing the correct view of reality. And without both of them being developed simultaneously, it can get really lopsided. And then you have this thing we talked earlier about, you know, this thing of a lot of social activists having total compassion burnout because they really think they can save the world by themselves. And they put all this energy into it and not really seeing how everything that arises, you know, is a confluence of causes and conditions and then their interaction with it. And that just gives a little space to the whole thing. You're not so solid about it and just striving, you know, in this solid way that leads to burnout. So, yeah.
You said in the first precept that one about not changing your action.
Oh, act naturally. Yeah,
It
the
seems
thing
like
about
if
acting
you're
naturally.
Transforming your mind, your actions themselves will transform. So I'm not quite clear on what kind of actions remain natural and which ones naturally change.
This is mostly about not acting in a really pretentious way and making a big show about your thought transformation practice. So it's sort of about being humble and just not making a big public deal about it, you know. Just acting normally, acting naturally, like don't, you know, wear some weird outfit and start doing all this kind of weird, outrageous, pretentious behavior, you know. And you might think, here I am, this totally bald person in this red suit. Who am I to talk about wearing weird outfits, okay? And it's true, you have a point there. But it's not out of pretentiousness because of my Lojong practice, which doesn't exist. But it's like that. It's like that. You know, don't make a big show. You know, don't put on some crazy outfit and make a big show about your... It's okay to shave your head and put on red robes in certain contexts. Okay. Does that make more sense? Yeah, and actually, yeah. And sometimes you know, it doesn't mean, you know, don't act in any way to help people if it's going to be different from what you did before. That's not what it means. Like, for sure, your actions will change. You know, your actions of body, speech, and mind will definitely change with your practice, and for sure, those things will change. But it mostly refers to just staying humble, not making a big deal, and not being pretentious about it. Yeah.
Number 18 that came to mind on the Wednesday night class too. There's this program called COPS, and on this, when it comes on, you know, you're changing channels. I'm trying to think why people watch it, and I think the entertainment value is that it's the only thing I can come up with, because to me it's like watching a car wreck. It's a really sad show to watch, just that people are in turmoil and upset, but people must. All I can come up with, people watch it and it's popular because they feel superior, or they're somehow rejoicing in the mishap of these people, because it's always a horribly sad story of addiction or poverty or something. There are these arrests going on with people who are either lacking education. It's always, you know, seems like low socioeconomic, you know, areas that they're filming, and it's the strangest show. It's just like watching just this misery.
Yeah.
It's like
it's weird, isn't it? It's really
all I
weird.
can come up with is the people who really love that show must love to watch other people in misery.
And part of it may be this thing of like, oh, you know, I might have problems, but boy, they're even worse off than me. You know, part of the motivation for that may be if people are even worse off than you don't feel so bad about your own suffering. I don't know. You know, that's sort of the only thing I can think of. It's like...
It's an example of number 18.
Yeah,
Go
definitely
along with
would
the tabloids.
Be. Totally, along with the tabloids, I'm sure. You know, most of network a lot of these. And, somebody told me about this weird thing. Like, I was in retreat for a really long time, and there's this weird thing. I feel like Mowgli the Wolf Boy. There's this weird thing about, like, reality TV shows, and they just film, like, normal people with all their problems. Like, why is that entertaining? I so don't get that. This is this big deal. They don't even have actors anymore. They just go into people's houses and film their misery, It's crazy. Like, if you use that for a class on the Four Noble Truths, it would make sense. But for entertainment, like, I just so don't get that. But that's another thing of this number 18, I think, this reality. Like, people tell me this story, and I'm like, you're kidding. They pay money to, like, there was one about these people in New Jersey that were, like, bail bonds people, and they filmed them, like, collecting the bail money. And I was like, I couldn't believe my ears. This weird thing. So yeah, all this kind of stuff. Like, why is that entertaining? Are there really? There were 3 when I was growing up. Like, what's, yeah. And what is it? Garbage. It's just total garbage. So yeah, throw away your TV. I sort of have a pet peeve about television. I'll admit that right up front. Kill your TV. Don't kill anything else but your TV. Yeah, Michelle.
Venerable Sarah, she had a kill your TV kind of thing, not in defense of my
Maybe it's a nun
thing that I've got going on. I now need to think about canceling it. Guru Rinpoche, I did not hear him say this, but I heard that he said that, you can always use it as the practice. And so when I say, I don't watch, but when you're flipping around and you see something really horrible or something, I always think like you can do Tong Lin.
Oh, totally. You totally can.
I don't think,
Yeah.
it's not like you have to get.
Yeah.
Everything I watch has to be total fantasy because I don't want to deal. There's enough reality going on in my life. I don't turn on TV to see reality, But including the news, which isn't real. But I'm just saying, which I thought was so interesting that he said that you can use it as the practice.
Forget it. Watching TV with Lama Zopa Rinpoche is like going on a 1-month Lam Rim course. Everything proves the reality of samsara. Like, it's totally different. Yeah.
That I think one should be fixated on it, but it does kind of. Every time I turn, you see the pervasive suffering.
Yeah. No, I just hear about these things like reality TV, and it reinforces my renunciation, right there off the bat. Like, all I have to do is hear it. But you don't have to veg out with the 6-pack 8 hours a day to increase your renunciation by watching television, Not... so there's a limit. This is the difference between watching it as a check-in from time to time to increase your renunciation and wasting your precious human rebirth, And that's not so fine of a line. Like, some of these things are fine lines, these aren't. But like I say, watching TV with a holy being like Lama Zopa Rinpoche is an entire teaching in and of it. Anything that he does is a teaching. It's crazy. I watched hummingbirds at a hummingbird feeder once, and it's all about the karma of the enemy wherever the sentient being is born. Because of karma, it has an enemy because a wasp showed up and was chasing the humming. So it becomes this whole teaching about karma just to watch the hummingbird feeder. So for sure, if you have a mind that's so well trained. But for most of us, unfortunately, TV just increases our craving and grasping and our, complete illusory view of reality. So it's not quite like that, You've been doing a lot of confessing this weekend. I rejoice. Okay, what else? Anything else? Questions? Yeah.
Talk a little bit more about the one that talks about not retaliating in like manner. There's various degrees of that. It could be verbal, it could be physical, and turning the other cheek. And I struggle with that a little bit on a couple of levels. One is, someone's hurting you physically or hurting someone else physically.
Yeah.
How might you respond? And isn't there ever a place to just say to someone, that's not really very nice?
Oh, totally. I'm talking about just not flying off with anger and popping off with something like really hurtful. I mean, for sure. And one of the Bodhisattva vows is not to let people do really things that will damage them, karmically, and to do whatever you can. But the motivation is completely different. It's out of compassion. You're trying to skillfully stop them from doing something that will, out of the motivation that you're trying to stop them from harming themselves in the future by doing this incredible negative karma. It's not about retaliation. That's really different than retaliation. And there's a story of the Buddha's past life. This is this famous story when he was the captain of a ship. And the ship was loaded with 500 traders, with a lot of money, and they'd gone to the island and gotten all the jewels. And one of the traders was going to kill all the rest of them and steal their money. And the Buddha in that life killed the one that was going to be the murderer, mostly out of, 100% out of compassion, to save that person from the karma of killing the other 499 people. Now, already at that point, the Buddha was such a highly realized being that he had the complete clairvoyance to know that was the only thing that he could do. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama always gets asked about this thing of self-defense. What do I do when somebody's attacking me or trying to hurt my family? And he goes, do you have to kill him? Can't you just shoot him in the foot and stop him? He's like, do the minimal amount of damage necessary to stop them. Like, yes, disarm them before they kill your family. Do what you have to do. But chances are you don't have to inflict, lasting damage just to engage in self-defense. And what this one is talking about is just reacting from exactly the same motivation that they have from anger, the wish to hurt them. It's not really talking about things like self-defense and things like compassionately and skillfully, pointing out to someone that they're doing something that will ultimately really damage them karmically in the future. Does that clarify? Does that help? Okay. But yeah, it doesn't mean, again, bodhisattva activity doesn't mean being a doormat. And this isn't what this is saying. It's just saying, if somebody yells at you, if someone tries to hurt you, practice the way we're talking about this afternoon with the thought transformation. Think, it's an opportunity for me to practice patience. It's the result of my karma coming back at me. You don't blame in this sort of self-existent way of like blaming them and thinking, how can they dare do this to me, and then yelling back. Because like I said before, that will just create a future completely filled with people yelling at you. Like, the way to guarantee a really crappy future lives filled with like angry yelling people is to retaliate. And the way to cut that completely is by being patient and then just being skillful in using your wisdom.